Hi everybody, you guys are good? Yeah, Tales of Kush is here, back again. Of late, I've not posted for a while. Last year I was very active and then I just stopped. So this year I just felt like maybe I need to do some reviews on my work and see which areas am I okay, which areas need improvement. Yeah. No, let's just say it's like an audit of what I did. Yeah, and I've checked 2 videos so far, Princess Azurat and Awan, the story about Awan. And one key thing about this year is I've been doing a bit more focus on the Ethiopian Bible. That is the key uniqueness of the Ethiopian Bible is the Book of Jubilees, the Book of Enoch, and also the Book of Maccabees is quite also unique in the Ethiopian Bible. But so I have to be fair because in my previous videos I used a lot of the Book of Jasher, so I had a lot of content coming from that, and there are some weaknesses when you compare the Book of Jubilees and the Book of Jasher. Yeah, like even you can see the reason why they built let me not call it the pyramid, the reason why they built the Tower of Babel in the Book of Jubilees and the reason why they built the Tower of Babel in the Book of Jasher is different. You can see that in the Book of Jubilees they're saying that the people are being mischievous, and so they wanted to make sure in case there's any other flood that comes they'll be able to survive. That was the reason why they were building that tower, so that they could sin without consequence. Anyway, that's the Book of Jubilees. But today's story is just I started talking about the serpent seed, and I talked about Cain's line a lot, but I felt like maybe I just need to say something about, comment about the Book of Adam and Eve. Although the Book of Adam and Eve, I've used it to talk about the Sethite theory and the possibility that it was when the Sethites fell that God decided now he wants to send the flood. According to that book, there are some key weaknesses in the book of Adam and Eve. One is how it names the children of Adam and Eve. We can see that in the book of Adam and Eve, they talk about Lulua and I think Aquila, and there were twins with Cain and Abel. But you can see that the book of Jubilees has a completely different narrative. Yeah, the book of Jubilees mentions that Adam had 14 children. Yeah, and so although the book of Adam and Eve, I believe it was found in Egypt, and a lot of early Christians were using it. It has some, when you compare it to the Book of Jubilees, it has some different narratives. So the same way with the Book of Jasher. So I just felt like maybe I can also just do, because right now I'm just reading from the Book of Jubilees and the Book of Genesis. I'm not using any Sethite theory. And what I said last week about the serpent seed being Cain's line, I don't want to be what I don't want to leave it at that, because it's the antediluvian period. All we know from the antediluvian period, from the Book of Jubilees and the Book of Genesis, is that only Noah's family survived, and we can see here as a precedent that Adam took the story of filling the earth very seriously. So the first man had 14 children according to the Book of Jubilees. And if that's a precedent to go by, we can see that there was a huge population in the antediluvian period. Yeah, and you can see here that Adam specifically had 14 children according to the Book of Jubilees. Yeah, and the named children in the Book of Jubilees is Cain, the firstborn son; Abel, the second son, was murdered; Seth, who replaced Abel; then the two daughters of Adam and Eve, Awan and Azura. Awan was the one who married Cain. Azura married Seth, and they continue populating the earth. Yeah, but one thing about the Book of Jubilees is, unlike the Book of Adam and Eve, which creates this with Seth versus Cain, the Sethite line which is holy, and then there's the Cainite line which is evil. The Book of the Book of Jubilees just introduces some other children who their functions are not named. We don't know much about these other 9 children of Adam, so it really throws a wrench into that idea that the Sethites and Cainites. Although what we know is that according to the Book of Jubilees, when Adam was expelled from the Garden of Eden, he went to the land of Elder where he could farm, and we know that Cain built a city and lived in the land of Nod, where he was a city dweller because the ground was cursed, according to the Book of Genesis. Anyway, we don't know much about these 9 children, and sometimes it's really hard to dig through the antediluvian period, the period before the flood. Yeah, but you can see, like, what we can piece from the Book of Genesis is that Cain had a son with a one called Enoch. And if Adam had 14 children, I wonder what was the total number that Cain had. So the population might be much more, because we can see here that the book of Genesis generally mentions like the firstborn sons. Yeah, we don't know conclusively how many more sons they had. Yeah, but we know that the son of Enoch, the son of Cain, sorry, who's called Enoch, is different from the one in the line of Seth, because we know the Enochian magic and the mystics of the esoteric. So many people point that there are two Cains, and this Cain would be the one probably dealing with magic. Yeah, that being said, I don't want to rule out that only Cain was evil, because what about the rest of the Sethites? Yeah, why did Noah's family only remain? Yeah, based on the population that we can see. Yeah, but anyway, one thing we know about Cain's line, apart from Enoch, we know that there is Jubal, Tubal Cain, and Naamah, and these were the children who are credited with being very innovative. One founded nomadic livestock herding. The other was invented music, the harp and the flute, and the other one invented metallurgy, metal working. Yeah, so we can see that that's what we can get from the line of Cain. Yeah, yeah, and as I said, Cain married his younger sister Awan, which is completely different from the narrative in the Book of Adam and Eve and the conflict against Satan. Yeah, and talks about the birth of Enoch. Yeah, and the Book of Jubilees doesn't give much insight into Cain's line. In fact, the Book of Genesis has more information about that. Yeah, so just a small comparison between the Book of Genesis and the Book of Jubilees. We say that the Book of Jubilees is what we call lesser Genesis, and you can see that the details about Cain's wife is only found in the Book of Jubilees. It's not in the Book of Genesis. And yeah, you can see that the Book of Genesis talks about the technological invention in Cain's line and cultural advancements. Because we hear some key innovations coming from the line of Cain. The Book of Jubilees just goes on chronological dates. Yeah, and we know that in the Book of Genesis, we know that he was cast to wander, but he was also marked for protection. Yeah. So the question is, protection against what? Yeah, there's a pre-Adamite theory that I don't want to get into. I know about it, but I won't mention it now. Yeah, but in the Book of Jubilees, it talks about how Cain died. Yeah, and again, how Cain died in the Book of Jubilees and the Book of Jasher is quite different. Yeah, but the Book of Jubilees talks about how Cain dies, and the Book of Genesis does not mention that. It's only mentioned in the Book of Jasher and the Book of Jubilees. But this year we are focusing on the Ethiopian Bible and the Book of Jubilees. Yeah. So in the line of Seth, the theory I find favorable, only that there are some inaccuracies in the Book of Adam and Eve. But in the underlying meaning, for me, I find it reasonable, stating that only the patriarchs, the heads, probably the firstborns, were able to keep the mantle, and when it finally fell on Noah, the rest of the world was in sin. So I feel like there's a bit of element to that, but according to the Book of Jubilees, the Sethite theory is left wanting. Yeah. Anyway, just to continue, you can see that what's different about Seth in the Book of Jubilees and the Book of Genesis, that is, the Book of Jubilees mentions the wives of the patriarchs. Yeah. While the Book of Genesis only mentions the children. So you can see here it mentions the wife and their relationship. So they started marrying their sisters. Then after, during the time of Mahalalel, started becoming cousins. Yeah, so you can see that the population was increasing at that time. And initially they could just marry their sisters, but as the population increased, they started marrying their cousins, and later in the Bible, yeah, there's even more to it. Yeah, you can even learn about Noah's wife was called Zara, as I said earlier. Yeah. So the other thing that Genesis uses a linear timeline, and only mentions the firstborns, as I said. But the Book of Jubilees is a bit more detailed. Yeah. Talking about marriage, the death, the weeks and the cycles. Yeah. Lifespans are only in Genesis. Anyway, so yeah, you can see the ages of the patriarchs in the Book of Genesis. I think I did a video about that, about the ages and how they were living up to 900 years. Then after the flood in Genesis 6 is when they say that they can only live up to 120 years. Yeah, so when you want other more insights that we get from the Book of Jubilees about the patriarchs, yeah, you can see here for Mahalel and Jared, the Book of Jubilees really expounds, because you can see it explains the meaning behind the names. Like during Jared's name is to descend, because that was the time when the Watchers descended to the earth to instruct the children of men in justice and righteousness. You know, the Watchers are the angels according to the Book of Jubilees and Enoch, and some of them did not follow that order and misled the humans. I'll talk about the Book of Enoch separately. But right now, let me just brush over that. But that's where witchcraft and makeup and fighting was introduced. Um, Weapons were introduced. And anyway, so the Book of Jubilees really expands on Enoch's story also. Well, Book of Genesis is very brief on it. Yeah, and the way the Book of Jubilees explains is that Enoch is credited as the first man to learn writing, science, and reading. Yeah, and he knew about astronomy, the weeks of the Jubilees, the correct seasons. Yeah, and he stated that he was taken to the Garden of Eden, and as actually I was saying in my last video, that there's a difference between the land of Elder, where Abel died and was buried, and the Garden of Eden. So in the Book of Jubilees, the Garden of Eden is somewhere sacred that is underwater. Yeah. So those are some key insights into the Book of Jubilees. Yeah. Yeah, and then you can see here the story of Lamech, and how at that time again the story of the fallen angels in Genesis 6 appears, and the flood happened, right? Yeah. So yeah. And now we know that Noah, who was a righteous man, blameless in his generation, and he survived. He built the ark and survived, and that's why the Sethites theory is very Christian in nature, because you can see, um, just like my video, the days of Noah. Um, my playlist called the days of Noah. Christians talk about that the church is like Noah, and the ark should be like the church, where the Christians should be found blameless in their generation. Yeah, yeah, and that's why I felt like, personally, I felt like the Satan theory really spoke to me, because you see there was this what we call the great falling away. Yeah, and the notion that the book of Adam and Eve brings is that they'll, just like pre-flood, there was a great falling away, where we know that the Sethites were trying to be in good record with God, but they mixed with the daughters, I mean, with the line of Cain, and that's when their world came into damnation. Well, of course, just like the book of Joshua, the book of Adam and Eve has some few nitty-gritty details that I have to be fair. If I'm saying that the book of Joshua has some errors, also the book of Adam and Eve also has some errors, but we are just going to focus on the book of Adam and Eve, and those are the challenges of reading the Apocrypha. Some details are inconsistent, and it's history anyway. In history, it's hard to reconstruct history. There are always some anomalies. Yeah, so if you still believe in the book of Joshua, you can do that. If you are from the book of Adam and Eve, and that's your theory, you can do that. But what I can do for now, because of these inconsistencies, I can just contrast and compare, and you guys can see best what to do with that information. Anyway, so I'm continuing with the book of Jubilees, and Noah is special in the book of Jubilees. I mentioned earlier what he did, but other things is that Noah knew about herbal medicine and healing arts. He was taught herbal medicine and healing arts by the angels. so that this was done so that he could combat illness and demonic attachments plaguing his children. I already told you that I committed that for me, the Nephilim are demons, and we know something more here about illness, that some of it could be spiritual. Yeah, yeah, and you can even see a Jubilees says that the demons are because of dead giants. Yeah. Anyway, this is not a drill. This is not just history. I have to say it slowly. I'm not just a historian. I'm what they call an eschatologist. And yes, the field of eschatology has its strengths and weaknesses. Yeah, but I just have to say it because during the time of Emperor Nero, there were so many signs that looked like Emperor Nero was the Antichrist, and people were reading into the Book of Revelations and saying that it's happening now. Also, you can see the story of Genghis Khan. How accurate were the censors then? How accurate was the census then that people would say that Genghis Khan really killed a quarter of the earth? Because what really happened is that most people were saying that Genghis Khan was one of the four horsemen, yeah, and he killed a quarter of the earth as per the Bible, yeah, and so the field of astrology has been active ever since the Book of Revelation has been written. People have been trying to interpret the Bible, read the signs and times, and getting ready. And yes, I just wanted to be more accurate when I was talking about the serpent seed, but I have something terrifying in my gut telling me if there's nothing new under the sun and history repeats itself, and somehow humans, whether they were from Cain's line, Seth line, or unnamed children in the antediluvian period, something happened to them that made them stop being human. And my prayer is that history does not repeat itself, and we find that again human beings will fall for the trap, lose their souls, and become like the Nephilim. Oh Lord, I pray that is not the revelation that I see, the history repeating itself. Is it true? Is it true that this is what is going to happen? Is it true? This is what is going to happen in the end times. Something similar. Humans will lose their soul. Maybe I'm thinking too much. Maybe I should just stick to the readings. Anyway, I just wanted to correct that. Let me not be too harsh on Cain. It's the antediluvian period. Apart from Noah's family, the rest of the world perished in the flood.